Objection leave is granted, so we'll set the clock for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. There is no more important act for a government than committing troops to war, and it was something that I referenced in my first speech. To send young men and women to spill their blood on foreign shores is the most solemn of any duty that a government must embark upon. I do resent, though, the implication that if you don't support this action, that somehow you support the savagery that is going on in Iraq, that somehow you're complicit in the barbaric acts that we're witnessing. We're better than that. Let's agree that what is going on in Iraq right now is barbaric, it's cruel, it's heinous, that our responsibility is to protect the innocents, and that what we're witnessing is an affront to our common humanity. I also understand the urge of many people who want us to act, just to do something. I've been feeling that way for more than a year while watching the butchery in Syria. I've felt that way most recently while watching bombs land on young children in Gaza, while their buildings collapse around them, while that conflict does nothing but to perpetuate the cycle of violence. Nor am I a pacifist. I'm not a pacifist. I do think that sometimes there is a case for military action, and in fact it was the Greens who were most vocal in calling for an intervention into the conflict in East Timor, and it was the government that was reluctant, the government of the day, that was reluctant to intervene. My concern is largely pragmatic. There are very eerie echoes here of the conflict in Iraq in 2003. Have we learnt nothing? What if our actions make the situation worse? What if we provide an even greater focus for more radicalisation and extremism? What if this is a rallying point for the enemies of justice? I mean, if the lessons from the war in Iraq weren't that, then we have learnt nothing. Let's not forget that a commitment of Australian troops also exposes Australians to dangers. The tragic beheading of an American journalist should give us pause for thought. But it is this rush to war that blinds us to other options. We know that Turkey has been involved in an armed struggle against the Kurdish people who have been fighting for an independent state for many years. We know that many of the Islamic State fighters are entering Iraq through Turkey. They're not flying into Syria or Iraq. Many of them are landing in Turkey and making their way into Iraq. And we know that Turkey's been retreating on the issue of human rights for years. If we are serious about this conflict, then we must confront these issues. We can't ignore these questions. We can't ignore the fact that the PKK, which was prescribed as a terrorist organisation, largely because of our relationship with Turkey, is now potentially going to be the beneficiary of Australian weapons. And I've worked very closely with members of the Kurdish community, and it is their wish that we do not get involved in a military sense, but we support greater humanitarian intervention, that we recognise their fight for self-determination, something that they've been fighting for many decades, the full expression of their cultural and political rights, and that we don't turn a blind eye while their people are being detained, arrested, imprisoned in places like Turkey and Iraq. So if we're professing to speak on their behalf, let's talk to them. And finally, we need more honesty in this debate. There'd be a lot more respect if we came into this chamber and we heard from both sides of politics who said, we've been asked by an ally to intervene and we're honouring that request. That's the basis of this intervention. I believe Australia needs to take its own place in the world and emerge from this adolescent dependence we have on our good neighbour. Decisions that were once made for us in London should not now be made for us in Washington. We need a full and frank debate. We need to make sure that it is this parliament, the democratically elected members of this chamber, that make this decision.